for Azeroth!
Hey yo folks, Student here, and welcome to the next video of my class specialization overview. Today I will be discussing the Windwalker Monk specialization since Legion's pre-patch has launched, and it has gone through a few tweaks, but it has remained mostly the same. The Windwalker specialization is of course the DPS spec for the Windwalker. I will make one about the Brewmaster later down the line, hopefully. I cannot be certain of that, but that is a possibility. So, the Windwalker Monk has gone through some changes since well, it already did so during Warlords, but now it has gone through further iterations in Legion, and some things have been streamlined, some things have been removed, while other abilities have been tweaked or buffed or nerfed and generalized. So, the idea of the Monk is still pretty much the same for the Windwalker as it always was. You have your energy bar and you have your chi bar. Certain abilities generate chi, while others' abilities spend it in order for you to do certain abilities. You hold on to some of your abilities, while others have been tweaked. So without further ado, let's go through the basic tools. And of course now it used to be that your opening ability for chi generation used to be the jab ability, but that has been changed. That is now Tiger Palm, which has been removed from its special, armored avoidance effect, which allowed you to just bypass certain armor, and has now just been generalized into a direct physical damage attack, as well as a chi generator with the chance of the free blackout effect. There is no longer more free Tiger Palm since it is now your chi generator. So that's pretty much it. The other abilities that include are, of course, Blackout Kick, which is your more general damage ability, your Rising Sun Kick, which has now, of course, is still the high damaging upwards, the kind of backhand kick, and of course it also holds onto its healing reduction. The damage increase that enemies take has been removed, so that is no longer the case. Fists of Fury still remain, only it is now, its stun effect has been removed, as well as that you can now use it while moving. Touch of Death has changed. It is no longer an instant death attack as soon as the enemy reaches a health pool below yours. Basically, when you activate it now, it places a mark on them, and after 8 seconds, your HP is reduced from theirs, and that is your maximum HP, not your current. So that's a pretty effective tool. Spinning Crane Kick still remains the same, but has been altered and enhanced. Spinning Crane Kick now costs 3 chi in total, and now allows you to perform, and now actually does increase damage for every unique enemy has been struck by either Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, or Rising Sun Kick. So this actually gets stronger if you've been hitting enemies with different attacks. This only counts for the 3 primary ones. Fist of Fury does not count under that category anyway. You still have Touch of Karma, which is of course a damage redirection effect. You still hold on to your Spearhand Strike. You still have your roll, though it has been altered for this current mode. I will switch it of course around and use some of the other abilities. You have your Energizing Elixir, which allows you to quickly refill your energy and chi. You have your Transcendence, and you have your Flying Serpent Kick. Crackling Jade Lightning still remain the same. These two remain the same. Crackling Jade Lightning does a lousy amount of damage over its time, but that's never been the case. That's because it mostly, of course, relies on a more spell power base, which the Windwalker Monk, of course, does not utilize. You still hold on to Storm, Earth, and Fire, but again, it has been altered. Instead of now allowing you to directly send a spirit towards an enemy target, you now actually just split yourself into 3 different spirits. You will be the Storm Spirit, while the Earth and Fire spirits will be AI controlled, but you can even directly control them, as I will show in a couple of minutes. Your Paralysis, your CC ability, and you have Effuse, which is considered your healing. You have Detox for clearing of course, any poison or disease effects, and Disable for, of course, some movement speed reduction, and you have Provoke for taunting. You still hold on to it, so I'll quickly show them off. As you can see here, Tiger Palm remains the same, and as you can see, you can then use Blackout Kick. As you can see, you now have a standard opening animation. There's no longer this the jab effect is actually something you have to activate. It now basically makes your weapons completely and utterly, kind of obsolete, considering you'll be smacking everyone with your fists and your feet in general. As you can see, those abilities remain pretty much the same. Fist of Fury remained the same as well, except it has now some extra flashy effect to it, as you can see. Touch of Death again, like I said, remains pretty much the same. Spinning Crake remains pretty much the same, but like I said, any enemy who is affected by a certain, effect that is affected by one of those other single target attacks will, of course, take increased damage. As it is explained from that point on. You have still your Touch of Karma, which still pretty much works the same, which causes that whoever you target out, any damage you do is redirected towards them. Spearhand Strike remains the same. As you can see, every one of these attacks still hold on to the same unique animations they actually already had before during Distant Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor. They really didn't have to create that more unique animations for the monk because of it. They already had something like that. You still, of course, have your Transcendence, which allows you to quickly move to your you switch position with these guys. So this is basically your movement effect. You still hold on to, as you can see, Flying Serpent Kick, which still pretty much stays the same. You still hold on to Crackling Jade Lightning, but again it remains the same, but it does a lousy amount of damage. You have your Paralysis, and then when the moment comes that you need to go high damage, you activate this, and all of a sudden, and as you can see, I can redirect these guys to actually start. They still work the same in every other way. They mimic your abilities. They use the exact same abilities as you do, except of course they do it at some reduced rate. But as you can see, they use the exact same moveset. They do have now a much shorter time effect. Rather than that they disappear after death, they now actually disappear after their duration has been removed. And it's like I said, you still hold on to all the others. You got this. And as you can see, it pretty much holds on to the same idea. All of the effects, all of the spells remain pretty much the same for the Windwalker Monk if you're familiar with playing this particular specialization in class. So that's pretty much all that there is to their abilities. What do I have to say about it? Well, I've always liked the Monk class because it's a much more active specialization, though I have to admit that energy regeneration seems a little lousy, so I'm not a big fan of that. But that's just something we gotta deal with. So let's get into the talents, which is where some of the more interesting stuff is. Now, on the level 15, you've got a selection of 3, and 2 are pretty much the ones that we're already familiar with. So, one of them has been changed and has now become Eye of the Tiger, which causes the Tiger Palm also applies Eye of the Tiger, dealing additional nature damage to the enemy and healing to the monk over 8 seconds. So basically this gives you some extra survivability. As you can see, as it is applied, it does damage, and I get healed for every dot that it applies. So that's a pretty self-explanatory effect. Now the other two, anyone who, like I said, who has played monks before should be pretty familiar with these two, which is Chi Wave and Chi Burst. Chi Wave still remains the same, which is this unique little effect that causes you to shoot out this projectile that starts bouncing back and forth between enemies and allies until that many bounces have been performed, and that's basically the whole gist of it. It is a healing and damaging effect that works on that has, of course, this sort of bouncy effect to it. Next up is the one that is, of course, the one with the longest cooldown, but has got some serious damage and healing potential, which is, of course, Chi Burst. Basically, it's World of Warcraft's idea of a Kamehameha attack. That's basically what it comes down to. You use it, you shoot a ball of energy, and it heals anybody who gets near it. And that's pretty much the idea of that. In the level 30s talents, we have mostly what is involved in movement, which is Chi Torpedo, Tiger's Lust, and Celerity. So Chi Torpedo is still remaining, but they have changed it. It no longer has a damage or healing effect to it, but it has combined a effect called, which used to be Momentum, which gave you a movement speed. Also, Chi Torpedo goes much further than Roll, and like I said, it gives you a movement speed as soon as you activate it. It's a very self-explanatory thing. It's pretty useful, I have to admit. Some people might not like it, but I actually have no problem with it due to its fact that it gives you a further distance to go, as well as, of course, some increased movement speed. Next up is Tiger's Lust, which is actually a secondary ability, which basically gives you or an ally target, whoever you select, gives you a 70% movement speed increase for 6 seconds and removes all roots and snares. So this is mostly, as I would say, something that is useful for PvP, because although some roots and snares are active in in dungeons and raids, it's not that active that you really need something like this. Some people might like it, but I'm like I won't really use this on allies because I'm never really good at targeting, so I really don't see the point of it. And celerity basically increases the number of rolls you have at your... Oh wait, I first need to wait, of course, until this is from cooldown before I can select it. And basically this increases your roll charges maximum by 3. And the cooldown of roll is reduced by 5 seconds. So you have an extra roll, and of course the cooldown is reduced, so you have more accessibility to it all the way. It doesn't really matter, it depends on your taste, you know, like if you want to help out some allies, all that sort of thing. It really depends on what you really like. Now, next up on the list we have, of course, on the level 45, which is all about your resource, which is energizing elixir, ascension, and power strike. So let's get basically to the first one, which is ascension, which increases your maximum chi by 1 and your energy regeneration by 10%. So this is basically it's pretty similar to what they have done with the rogue. Like they just give you an increase on your energy regeneration, and you have an extra combo point, but in their case it's called a chi point. So you can build up some extra chi points just in case you need none. I wouldn't expect really that to happen, but the extra energy regeneration could help you out a bit if you really are in a bind. I don't think it is particularly useful, but I guess that depends on your kind of taste. So that's pretty much the whole idea around Ascension. Power Strikes has a similar idea, still works pretty much as the same before, except of course now it just works with whatever you use, which is only your Tiger Palm. It used to be that it gave any of your chi generating abilities an extra chi every 15 seconds. Now of course that only counts for Tiger Palm since it's the only one, so usually it only gives 2 chi. Now in the first hit I make, it actually gives me 3 chi on my first punch, and every 50 seconds that will reoccur and reoccur until of course, well, combat starts, and then it just gets reapplied again and again every 15 seconds. It's pretty straightforward, and energizing elixir is probably the one most used in a oh shit or emergency situation for when you really need it. Basically, when you find yourself in a fight and you've been, of course, as explained, been going through every little bit of your tricks, and you find yourself completely without energy. What are you gonna do? You pop this, and boom, you got full energy. You got full energy, and all of your chi is completely charged, so you have full access to your all abilities. Utilize this one is probably the one you need to utilize the most. It's particularly when you just want to immediately unleash hell on your opponent. So this is really something you need to be very keen aware of when to use it. It's not something you just want to use on, whenever you feel like it. So you really got to think this through. So you really need to think this through when you use it. Alright, so on the level 60 talents, we have something that is mostly around the idea of crowd control. We'll start off with the passive, which is Dizzying Kicks, which allows that a black eye kick also reduces the target's movement speed by 70% for 3 seconds. Unless you're playing in a raid that really requires, ad control, like one of those things where an ad that tends to fixate itself on an enemy, this usually isn't something you need, because this is just only useful for that sort of situation, and there aren't really a lot of that in general in raids, and you can't really these days easily swap between talents since the new system has been implemented, so I wouldn't really recommend this one. Alright, so next up we have Leg Sweep, which is the most, let's say the one that has the most use in most situations, which is basically that it's an AoE. It says it's called that it knocks down opponents, but basically it's a AoE stun, which causes that all enemies within 5 yards are stunned. So basically anyone who's close to your face, when you get surrounded, you activate this and they're stunned for 5 seconds. It's a pretty long time, even in PvP standards, that's pretty long. But I can definitely see it used even in PvE situations, considering certain raid encounters at least. So I'll just quickly show it off. And as you can see, it only works, of course, on this particular enemy because he's the only one close enough. But I think you get the gist of it. It's basically a nice little situation for when you get yourself a little too crowded. Now just for the sake of it, we'll quickly move to the level 75 until this ability is off cooldown. I will quickly describe them real quickly, and then I'll show them off for you. Healing Elixir is pretty much still the same, that it is an emergency healing effect that works the same as it always does. If your health drops below 35%, you this is immediately triggered, healing you for 50% of your maximum health, but it's these days also on demand, so you can use it whenever it needs to be. And for a moment, as you can see, the Lick Sweep is almost off cooldown. So for the sake of it, we'll remove that and get Ring of Peace in the selection. Basically, Ring of Peace still works pretty much the same as it always does. It just causes you to create a Ring of Peace. Enemies in the ring that use a harmful spell or ability will be knocked out of the ring. So I can't really, demonstrate it, but I guess I can just show the effect. So you activate this, and anyone within this circle who tries to use a spell, as is described, will get knocked out of it. So it moves with you, so that's pretty useful. But it's a self-explanatory ability on what it does, so it really doesn't need any further explanation. Now, I've already explained Healing Elixir. I'll quickly show it off. For example, just let's show the emergency situation. And I almost died from that. And as you can see, I can activate this. And I'm healed for 50% of my maximum health. You have 2 charges, so you can quickly actually gain back 30% of your maximum health on demand, which is a pretty sweet little emergency situation. I'll quickly use some healing, some first aid for myself just in case. But I think it's pretty clear what this effect does. Next up on the list we have, of course, the other two, which is Diffuse Magic and Dampen Harm. Diffuse Magic, as the ability should, of course, explain, reduces magic damage you take by 60% for 6 seconds and transfers all current active harmful magical effects on you back to their original caster, if possible. So this really doesn't work in a PvE setting unless maybe you're fighting ads who apply these sort of dot effects or negative effects, because, well, this doesn't really work in PvE, considering if there is, the applying of negative effects on you, it's usually done by the boss, and they can't be affected by their own abilities. Everybody knows this, so there's not really much of a use of it. I would like to show it off, but considering the other two, I might actually just skip out on this one. I think the explanation is pretty sweet, and is pretty clear, so I can't really show it off here. So I'll just skip that one. So let's get to Dampen Harm, which is a nice little thing. It's called reduces all. So it basically works very simple. It reduces all damage taken by 30% from the next 3 attacks that damage you for 50% or more of your maximum health. So basically this is a damage reduction when it gets over a certain limit. This isn't a bad idea in a certain way, but again, it has mostly PvP functions because of the fact that it actually only works when you get that much damage, and it only works with attacks, so not spells. And considering that that's usually not the case in PvE situations, I can't really see the effect of it, or better said, the usefulness of it outside of PvP situations, if I've got to be honest. I guess for tanking this could be useful, but not for the DPS spec. So that's pretty much that. Let's just show it off just for the fun of it anyway. So I activate this, and as you can see, I take massive amount of reduced damage, but still this thing hits like an absolute truck, and since I'm not a DPS, it kind of got me killed straight away. So we're just gonna have to wait for a little resurrection. In the meantime, I can't get over the other ones, which are of course 2 active and a passive. Now, as I have explained before, there are certain abilities that are, of course, like with any specialization, are unique to certain specializations, certain, abilities that are unique to them, and every one of them has it. With the monk in particular doesn't have a lot of them naturally, but he does have a unique mastery called Combo Strike. Now, it used to be that it had an application involving your Tiger Eye brew, but they have now changed it that it involves your hit combo, your combo strikes, because mastery has now been changed that whenever you use an ability that isn't a repeat of the previous ability, you deal increased damage with it. So this is a pretty sweet ability when you need to use it, when you know how to use it properly. And as a monk, you really won't be doing a lot of repeats of the same ability. At best, you should be doing 2, and with certain abilities, even that is reduced to a minimum. So this really isn't going to happen that much. And of course, the afterlife effect, which causes when you kill an enemy, it drops a healing sphere for you, and if you kill an enemy with Blackout Kick, you also have a 50% chance that it drops a Chi Sphere for you. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So with the talent, the hit combo effect, each successive attack that triggers combo strikes in a row grants 2% increased damage, stacking up to 8 times. So this basically increases your damage by a percentage amount up to a maximum of 16%. It's not bad, but keeping up this combo idea is a pretty tricky one to pull off. So just for the sake of it, let's test it out. As you can see, it pretty much works as it should. You can ramp this up pretty quickly, but again, it's a pretty tricky thing to keep up. So I wouldn't rely on this too much considering how it works. It's pretty easy to keep it up, but there's also a big risk that you can actually lose it due to the fact that you have to rely on a continuing effect of different combos, and that's not always easy to pull off as the Windwalker, because you're going to be sometimes, you know, repeating blackout kicks. So I wouldn't rely on this too much, but with a certain other ability in the kit, you can actually maybe pull this off. It's not a bad one, but it relies a lot on the mastery thing. It's not bad. I can definitely see its effect in certain situations. It may actually still... I just don't think it is as useful as two of the others, but one is in particular much more useful due to the lack of some other proper effects of it. I'm just going to quickly switch back to some of my more preferred talents than the other one. Let's get to the next one, which is Rushing Jade Wind. Now this one is in particular a little bit more interesting. This used to be that this replaced Spinning Crane Kick, and it was something that was, you know, just generalized. It just caused damage for all enemies within your area and healing for anybody in your area, but now it has been changed that it is just a damaging effect, and it works in a similar to Spinning Crane Kick, but instead it now relies much more, but it is considered now separately, and it only requires one chi. So this is actually not a bad ability considering the amount of damage it does over time. It's a sustained effect, and as you can see, it does quite a bit of damage for such a low cost ability, and considering it's AoE, this could work out pretty well in raid encounters that require quite a bit of, you know, AoE damaging, so mostly against trash mobs. So I can definitely see it using it. And just in case if you really want some extra damage on single target, the next one up the list is pretty much self-explanatory for anyone who's already been playing a monk for a while, which is Invoke Xuen. Basically what this causes is that you summon an effigy of Xuen, the white tiger, for 45 seconds. Xuen attacks your primary target and strikes 3 enemies within 10 yards every 1 second with Lightning Tiger for amount of nature damage. Now this seems to have gotten a little bit of a nerf in comparison to how it usually used to be. It does last for quite a while. I mean, 45 seconds is pretty long, but still, considering its effect, I really am not sure if it's really that useful. Just for the sake of it, let's see what this baby can do. As you can see, it does continually apply constant damage, and in general, that's not a bad thing to have. And 45 seconds is pretty long, so it's not that bad to have. So you can still consider this one as a good one, but I wouldn't rely on it too much in general due to the fact that, of course, it's on a 3-minute cooldown. Although it's for 45 seconds, it's, well, I guess it just depends on your taste. If you want some higher increased single target damage, this is definitely a good pick. But considering on how the monk is already emphasized very strongly on that, I don't think you really need that all too much considering how he works in general. So I'm not saying this is bad, but you don't really require this as a monk for single target considering how good it is. It does have some cleaving effect, but still. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is in the level 100 talents, and these ones are pretty, well, I wouldn't say all over the place, but they're definitely not normal. So your first one is called Chi Orbit. Every 5 seconds an orb of energy forms and rotates around you until it impacts an enemy, dealing a certain amount of damage and to all nearby enemies. So basically you activate this and you start apparently generating these orbs around you, which should happen any second. There's the first one, and this will keep generating over 5 seconds. This isn't too bad for one in the starting initiation, and it, you know, it has this sort of application of constant damage over time. But considering that it's only, I mean, of course altogether it's about 16k damage, but these things just don't have the same effect that they could have. I mean, as you can see, it does work, it does splash damage, but still, it seems a little lackluster. And considering that these things first make a full rotation before they hit, it just doesn't seem as reliable as I would like to put it in comparison to some of the other abilities, which are, in a way, pretty curious. Particularly this one in particular has got my interest, considering how it works. Now, this is called Whirling Dragon Punch, and what it basically does is that it's this amazing flashy move that you perform on your enemy target. So that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Well, it gets a little crazier than that. Now, what it actually basically does, so this has no energy cost and no chi cost, but it does have a 23-second cooldown, or at least at the moment it does. But it also can only be used while Fist of Fury and Rising Sun Kick are both on cooldown. So it's not or, it's when they're both on cooldown. So you can only use this when they're both on cooldown. Now that's a pretty big margin step to be made. So you really need to think this through on how to use it. So, but it's really not that hard. Basically, you just go for the sort of triple combo idea. So you open up with Fist of Fury because that one has a duration, so you can build up some energy. You get this, and as you can see, I can now perform this amazing ability. It basically is kind of the Windwalker's idea on what the the rogue specializations all have, which is of course Death from Above, but this one actually works the other way around. Like the AoE comes after the initial strike, but it's AoE in general, and it's a pretty flashy move. I mean, if you just looked at it, it was pretty sweet, to be honest. I mean, you just open up like this, and just for the sake of this, and then boom! I mean, it looks really flashy, I gotta admit, and considering it's only on like a 23-second cooldown, this thing is pretty on demand when you need it, because if you're not using these two when they're off cooldown, you're definitely doing something wrong in your rotation. I mean, they're basically what you need to do good damage. So because these two are your highest damage abilities, and they both, of course, are on a cooldown, which are pretty similar. But seriously, when you're not using these two when they're off cooldown, you're definitely doing something wrong in your build. Come on, that's just terrible. I'm not a genius I'm no number cruncher or a professional monk player, but come on, it's pretty self-explanatory. So the next up on the list is the one that I've got the most curious description about, which is Serenity, which is a replacement of Storm, Earth, and Fire, and it works basically like the original Serenity, except it's not connected except, of course, that one wasn't a replacement of Storm, Earth, and Fire, and this is, so that really gets me a bit confused. So basically what it does, you enter into an elevated state of mental and physical serenity for 8 seconds. While in this state, you deal 40% increased damage and healing, and all chi consumers are free and have 50% reduced cooldown. So basically, this turns you into a godlike killing machine for only 8 seconds. Sounds great? Kinda is, but there's one little problem. It's only 8 seconds. Like, you turn into a godless killing machine, maybe in a certain way, but it's only for 8 seconds. And most of your chi spenders have a cooldown of themselves, even if they are reduced by 50%. Most of these will not be able to be used. Rising Sun King can at least be used twice in a row, and that's if you're lucky. That's if you're lucky. Most of these can be used constantly. You can use Spinning Crane Kick, so that's the only kind of redeemable quality, considering this doesn't have a, it doesn't have a cooldown, and so does Rushing Jade Wind if you've got that one selected. But the rest of it is just so odd. It just doesn't work with this. I just don't get it. Why would you pick this? I mean, I'm gonna just test it out just in case. So I activate this, and all of a sudden I can just go full ham on everything I have. But like I said, it's only on only on an 8-second cooldown, and there we go. It's over. All of a sudden I'm back in the old state, and that's pretty much it. And that's on a 1.5 minute cooldown for only 8 seconds. Storm, Earth, and Fire may have a longer. Let's take a look. Well, I can't take a look at it right now, but we'll do it as soon as it's off cooldown. But that's only on an 8-second duration with a 1.5 minute cooldown. I don't think it's worth trouble. It just isn't. I mean, compared to Storm, Earth, and Fire, which can be used for both AoE and single target, this one just seems a little lackluster. I mean, you can spam Spinning Crane Kick until you start puking, but as the character, but my god, it's just not that effective. So that's the pretty basic gist of the Windwalker Monk. It still holds on to quite a few of its original talents that it had before during Mist of Pandaria and Warlords. And it still holds on to that even to this day. And I can't say that it's bad, but some of the ones just seem a little out of balance with the other two compared. I mean, of these three, this one seems the least lackluster considering what you're paying for it. I mean, you lose Storm, Earth, and Fire, which we'll be, of course, switching back to for a moment, so that's not a bad thing to take a look at. What the hell is this? Anyway, no, not important. Getting a little off track here. So let's switch back to this. Now, Storm, Earth, and Fire has a 1.5 minute recharge, and this has 2 charges on it, and these spears last for 15 seconds, and maybe they only do 45% damage, but still, considering that these guys can be actually set on separate targets, and if you need to, be focused on a single target if you need to, it just seems the way better choice of the two. I just don't get this one. It's just a weird choice to me. This is of course completely personal opinion. If you love this kind of state of 8 seconds of godless killing, go right ahead, but I'm just not seeing much of a use of it. So what do I have to say about the Windwalker Monk? Well, to be honest, they haven't changed a lot about it. They have tweaked it a bit, maybe made it a little less OP in leveling, particularly with, of course, touch they've used to be ridiculous in leveling. I mean, every 2 minutes you could just instantly kill something as soon as its HP load dropped like 1 point below yours. And they've, of course, gotten rid of that. They made Fist of Fury. It's no longer a stun effect. It's no longer a tanking effect either. So overall, I still think they have made it a very good specialization for anyone who enjoys, you know, kicking and punching the shit out of just about anything they desire. So as soon as, of course, and as you can see, it still holds its flashy style that it always had. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So it still holds on strong as one of the first specialization that, first of all, of course, or specialization, better said, the first class that actually showed off unique animations in general, which is in no way considered to be a bad thing, considering that the old animations were getting a little boring, and this definitely, of course, amps the ante for the idea of a much more unique specialization and class in general. Of course, you'll have to get used to certain rotations using certain talents and specializations, but in general, I think this is a well-balanced class with good effects that work in general with its specialization. So in general, I can't say that there's anything wrong with it, and I'm looking forward to trying out this in Legion and maybe into some raid content if I can get into it. Still, I'm pretty pleased with this specialization. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Oh, this has been Do the Dutch, showing you off the Windwalker Monk specialization. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to see more of these videos, please subscribe to the channel where you can find more. There are more of these videos also found on my channel about the other specializations of certain other classes. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, stay safe, be cool, and I'll see you to the next one. Bye-bye!